In this video on the Certified Q&A, let's tackle another question for the Google Cloud Platform Associate Cloud Engineer. It's very important to the process of understanding Google Cloud and passing the certification exam that you go through the question and attempt answering it yourself first. So pause the video, work through the question. We'll catch up in just a little while and I'll show you how I do it. In this scenario, you're a project owner and you need your coworker to deploy a new version of your application to App Engine. You want to follow Google's recommended practices. Which IAM role should you grant your coworker? A project editor, App Engine service admin, an App Engine deployer, or an App Engine code viewer? Now, the key parts of this are clearly the App Engine and the IAM roles. Those are the two key things that you need to know. But what this particular question is trying to test you on is the Google's recommended practices. You need to take the question about the IAM roles in context with the recommended practice. So when it comes to IAM, the key recommended practice is the principle of least privilege. In the principle of least privilege, you grant no more and no less privilege to a user or account than is required to do the job or task. If you give too few privileges, obviously the job cannot be completed. But if you give too many, then that becomes a security vulnerability. Why is that? There could be multiple reasons. Maybe an external person gets control of that account and that person might do things that are malicious. But that need not be the only cause. It could be that a particular employee in your company that you used to trust has currently gone rogue. Or it could be that an employee accidentally does things which he didn't intend to do. Now, this has happened to me in the past where some people in my team accidentally, or one person in my team rather, accidentally deleted certain parts of a database that they shouldn't have. Ideally, we should have only given them read access when they also had write access at that point. So when you're answering this question, keep in mind the principle of least privilege. On IAM roles, what are the different IAM roles available? In cloud identity and access management, there are three types of roles: primitive, predefined, and custom. Primitive existed when GCP was just starting out, and they have three key roles: owner, editor, and viewer. These tend to have a bunch of, or a larger bunch of permissions as a part of these roles, and they tend to be very coarse-grained. Later, there were the predefined roles, which provides more granular access. For example, you can say, for Compute Engine, these users are only allowed to use the machine, but they are not allowed to create the machines. For others, you can say they are allowed to read and create the machines, but they are not allowed to delete the machines. So you're able to give more fine-grained access with using the predefined roles, and these exist for everybody using Google Cloud. When either primitive or predefined don't suit your requirements, you can create what is called a custom role. Typically, when creating custom roles, you start off with a predefined role and then add or remove permissions to get what exactly you want and what you want to use just within your organization. Apart from the billing administrator, which allows you to manage billing and to add remove billing admins, the key roles in the primitive roles are viewer, editor, and owner. The viewer has view and read access on resources. An editor will have the viewer access. In addition to that, they will have the permissions to make changes to the system, like deploying applications, modifying code, and configuring services. An owner will have all the permissions of the editor and the viewer. And in addition to that, they were able to do things like deleting projects and add and removing permissions from other members, and also adding and removing members. So in this question now, if we look at option A, the project editor, going back one slide, you can see that the project editor has the ability to deploy applications. But then the problem with this is that it does not work well with Google's recommended practice. Why? Because the permissions are too wide. A person given project editor access will be able to deploy applications, but they will be able to also do a lot more. So this is giving more permissions than is required to get the job done. And though it gets you the ability to deploy applications, it wouldn't be the right answer because it doesn't suit Google's recommended practices. Let's see if we can eliminate any other obviously wrong options. So if you look at option D, it is only a viewer permission here, and this definitely does not suit us because we want to deploy a new version, which means making changes. So we can easily eliminate D and be confident that it is not going to be the right answer. That leaves us with two options. Will App Engine Service Admin be suitable for this? Now, I don't entirely know all the permissions at this point that is available for this particular role, but I'm thinking, with a naming convention like admin, I think it is going to be too permissive, and I'm not going to be very confident about that answer. What about App Engine Deployer? Given everything else, I get the feeling that this must be the right answer, even though this again, I can't be 100% sure because I don't know all of the roles by heart. So in this particular case, as you can see, even though I do not have the answer for sure, I can eliminate some wrong options and make a reasonable guess about what would be the right answer. Looking at the documentation now, having answered the question, we can verify that App Engine Deployer would be the right option. App Engine Service Admin would be too permissive, and App Engine Code Viewer at the bottom or the App Engine Viewer would have too less permissions to get the job done. For App Engine Deployer, we can specifically see that they have the permissions to write access to deploy and create new versions. Clearly, the App Engine Service Admin also has that, but then it has got way more permissions, which makes it not a suitable answer. What are the key learnings that we can take away from this particular question? You need to know the principle of least privilege. It is worth repeating what that is, which is that you should not grant a user or an account more permissions than is required to get the job done. In general, primitive roles tend to be too permissive and coarse-grained, and they're typically not recommended. When you're studying, get a sense for predefined role naming conventions and what permissions they typically provide. There is a pattern. There are a large number of these roles with many permissions, and it is impossible, or it is impractical rather, to by heart all the roles and permissions. It just isn't worth it, and there's just too many of those to spend your time on. Another approach that I used in this particular question was to eliminate the clearly wrong options. Even when you're not sure about the answer, just eliminating options that you know cannot be right reduces the chances of you being wrong. So it is a defensive approach when you do not know the answer, but it increases your chances by eliminating wrong ones. There is one part of this that I would like to highlight is how do I know some of these roles even exist, right? Given that there are so many roles and so many permissions, if the examination asks a question saying, has an option for App Engine Deployer, how do I know if there is such a role at all? Without by-hearting, it's impossible to know all of them, right? But then by-hearting all of them is not worth it either. So I've used a particular strategy which seems to have worked for me so far, and that is that when a particular role is mentioned, say for example App Engine Deployer, I assume it probably exists, right? I go with the assumption that given that they've mentioned it, maybe it is there. Obviously, there's no guarantee that it does exist, but it reduces the amount of work that you have to deal with. So in this particular case, given the option App Engine Service Admin and App Engine Deployer, I say, okay, I assume all of them exist. Now I have to try and eliminate the one that is possibly not correct, or choose the one that is possibly correct. All right, now it's time for you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Go ahead, do that right now, because there's loads of great content coming up for learning Google Cloud and preparing for the certifications.